What's your biggest gripe with like the science-based lifting community, would you say, if you have one?
All of it. All of it. Now, by now, all of you guys should know that I love to argue. It's my favorite pastime. It's why I made a YouTube channel. So I just have more people that I can vent to. Now, the thing I like to argue about the most in the online fitness space is the science versus bro science debate. It's the thing I've used up the most hot water over as I stand in the shower staring at the wall, yelling at nothing. And today we're going to talk about it because, guys, I'm telling you, the tides are turning. I think people have gotten burnt out from the evidence-based nerds trying to claim that this gimmicky shit is actual real science. And I'm here for it. And hopefully I can do my part to add enough force in that direction to help that building topple just as fast as possible. Now, of all the people that have commented on this topic, Fuad has done a fair bit of work because he's had guys on his podcast like Brad Schoenfeld and Jeff Nippard, and he's taken them to task, asking how this stuff is put together, how it even makes sense to attack it from this perspective, given all of the things that you can't take into account. And today he has another exercise science expert on. So let's see what this guy has to say. As always, guys, hit the link below, barbellapparel.com, get some Bromley merch. And what do we have here? A base strength. Oh, there is just so much information in here. All of my thoughts condensed down into a nice little manual. It's not 500 pages of nonsense, but it's also not a 19-page ebook that I'm charging you $50 for. Check this bad boy out at BaseStrength.com. Back to the show.
Samuel, do you want to give us your full title?
Sure. Yeah, I'm an associate professor of exercise science at the University of South Florida and director of the USF Muscle Lab. So I run a lab that studies muscle growth and how muscles grow in response to different interventions.
Well, Samuel reached out to me and he said a lot of the science that's out there is not actual science, but people just kind of, I don't know, what would you say, Samuel, making it up or winging it or contorting the truth?
Yeah, I wouldn't say winging it or making it up, but maybe exploiting it for clicks or maybe overvaluing the data or presenting the data in a way that's a lot more compelling than it actually is. I think with social media like becoming just more of something that people engage in, and in particular scientists wanting to become influencers and get involved in social media, scientists take it on the other role of just kind of critiquing everything and explaining why everything is wrong.
Yes.
And if you're smart and intelligent enough, you can make a lot of people look stupid with the science that you point to and how you present it.
It's really important the way you frame this. It's over extrapolation. That's a problem. They're not making it up. They're doing the studies the way they know how, the only way they can, with limited funding, very few people. There's only so many variables they can keep track of at one given time, and the study runs are very short. That doesn't mean you can't pull anything out of it, but you're limited. So when you have an incentive, guys starting on social media, trying to make a brand, the only reason that anybody is going to follow you is because they think you can help them get jacked. That is 100% why they're there. If you're willing to use sensationalized thumbnails to lead people to believe that the data can support more than it can, if you're willing to base an entire gimmick around something that's unproven, calling it science, I'm looking at you, Milo, you dip. That's over extrapolation. It is ascientific. And what bothers me, it's not so much that they do it. You expect them to do that. That's part of human beings in a field working towards their incentives. But that's why you have the scientific system that's supposed to check for that. You're supposed to get punished when you step out of line and when you make recommendations that the research cannot make. And the fact that that doesn't happen in this field should make everybody super hesitant to listen to any of it. They'll do this cope where it's like science agrees on 90%. The 90% you agree on is shit that we've already known because we have generation after generation applying it in some way. If part of that 10% is the belief that you don't need to replicate studies, that you don't need a group of people that provides enough statistical power, that's not a small thing to disagree over. Yet this is where they will never have arguments over because it points directly to the weakness in everybody using the field of exercise science to inform what they're doing next.
And I think sometimes that evidence is greatly exaggerated. You know, they're when Holly's competing and she's evidence-based and she'll try to her feedback from the judges is to bring up her plates. And so she's like, okay, what does the evidence say? The evidence says somewhere after 30 sets, there's a plateau in muscle growth of what you can achieve. And I said, but also, none of the studies are training how you train. The people in the studies don't have your genetics for muscle growth.
Right.
And the majority of the individuals in these studies are nowhere near where you are in your training career.
You hit the nail on the head right there. I've been beating this drum forever. There's three big things that you need to consider that exercise science can't address that makes its conclusions meaningless. Your program experience and conditioning level, and your particular genetics. It is insane to take any of these small differences you pull from a study and come up with a broad rule that you just apply regardless of any of those three things. This is an example. Those things the studies can account for, infinitely more important than the little bit that it can. And that's why my blood boils when they use the term optimal. Not only can they not tell you what's optimal, but it gets people to think about the small things before the big things. Guys, shaving your legs is how people get the edge in races to make them aerodynamic, reduced wind drag. But if you're overweight and out of shape, you have no conditioning, you don't know how to ride a bike, and you can't swim, would you really describe that strategy as optimal for getting ready for a triathlon? And even as important as those small things might be, they don't have the ability to comment on it accurately.
I think you touched on the most important part. They're in these studies, are they being very specific in that these are, advanced training individuals? Are they beginners? They're 60 years old, they're 20 years old?
So the majority of studies are in college age individuals, and typically that's 18 to 35. And that's just a convenience thing, right?
Sure.
Most studies are either in untrained individuals, so people who don't currently resistance trained, so research in untrained individuals, or studies in trained individuals, which is typically defined as having engaged in resistance training for at least 6 months. Most studies are 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or 12 weeks long. And this is probably the most massive limitation of research, because what can you really see in 6 or 8 weeks?
Exactly.
But it's just because the semester schedule in school.
So the basic idea that whatever margin difference you would see between a particular exercise or rep range or protocol is just going to persist over your entire training career, it's not just ascientific. It requires like a sincere lack of critical thinking or curiosity. So given that we have the same type of kind of untrained, semi-trained person, and you're only training them for a short period of time, what is the ability to comment on the most important question, which is what happens when gains slow down?
Does anybody really give a shit? Is the evidence compelling enough to even worry about? Is it even anything worth, or are people just really trying to dig?
But I made some posts on this because this was the first time I ever saw science doing this. This is like the last 2 or 3 years I've seen these development.
Okay.
So we measure muscle and muscle thickness. So we'll take an image and measure from the bone to the muscle fat interface.
Okay.
So like the average bicep is around 4 centimeters thick. Mm-hmm. The average muscle growth you'll see over time, like let's say 8 weeks in the bicep, is 0.1 to 0.2 centimeter increase in muscle thickness.
Okay.
And our ability as scientists to measure that change is not that good. Generally, we can say your muscle grew or your muscle didn't grow.
Sure.
What I've seen recently, and this is the majority of the science content that y'all are seeing. I don't have TikTok, but I see it on Instagram. A study will see 0.1 centimeters of growth in one group, and they'll see 0.15 centimeters of growth in the other group. Now, me as a scientist, 0.1 versus 0.15, that's the same. Like, you cannot measure 0.05 centimeters with ultrasound. You can measure the same image twice and get that big of a difference.
Right.
But what they're doing now, I can't believe the scientists are now doing this, but they're influencers now, so they have to.
Yeah.
0.1 versus 0.15, what they're saying on social media is 50% more growth if you do this exercise versus that exercise.
Right.
Yes, this is the type of shit that has to get pushed back against that isn't, because this is where it gets truly misleading. And I'm sorry, Israel is one of the most guilty. He might not play with the numbers the way that like a shady car dealership would, or a supplement company where, 50% more, and it's some like microscopic difference. It doesn't really mean anything. But Israel's routinely posting things like doing more cardio won't get you leaner. That's an actual title on one of his videos. And of course, there's some nuance breakdown in there, but if you count the number of people that get past the first 8 minutes of dick jokes in his videos and actually listen to it versus the 20 million plus impressions any one of his videos is going to get, you see how it kind of spoils the water and starts to spread bad information. So consumers are like super sensitive about this shit. Like, don't sell us bullshit because you're just trying to move a product or move your brand. But when you get a sufficient number of people that get the feeling of, well, no, this is science. This makes me feel like a good, intelligent, educated boy. I'm doing it the smart way. You're doing it the dumb way. People will go to bat for this even when it's engaging in this type of egregious shit. It's not optional to have communicators that are actually aware of the sources of error and actually comment on them to frame the results in a realistic way. So if they're not going to hold themselves accountable, then you, the consumer, has to.
I think a lot of scientists speak about training and they want to push all their thoughts and ideas into the bodybuilding world where things are different, right? Yeah. Normal, like all the research we have is people with the governor on.
Yeah. And we have no limitations in our world.
Y'all are removing the governor. And there's so many instances where I think scientists need to say, I'm not really sure. Because with that governor removed, does more always lead to more? It's possible. I don't think it'd have a big effect, but I guess it's possible it has some effect. And I know that's not a satisfying response.
You know what's satisfying about it? It's satisfying to hear somebody say, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's completely it right there. Somebody having the humility to be like, I'm not here to give you a firm answer. I'm here to tell you where the studies have pointed to and all of the reasons we either may or may not be confident in that result.
Some of these muscle growth studies are in trained people and they're seeing so much muscle growth that for me, I don't believe it. Like, I don't think it's possible. So we wrote a critique of, and this is something that would be impossible for a consumer that doesn't do science to know that, hey, this study saw 0.7 centimeters of muscle growth in trained people.
Yeah.
If you can, in 8 weeks.
Yeah, it's
and
crazy.
if you could replicate that, let's say you could replicate that finding 3 times. I think my quads would go from the size they are now to James size quads. If I could replicate the finding 3 times, that's why I don't believe it.
Yeah, of course.
And then a paper came out recently, and this also will show that, like, I could, if I went tomorrow to become a science-based influencer, I could convincingly make people believe one thing or another thing depending on what I choose.
Right.
So the same research group that's shown a lot of this high volume stuff published a low volume study.
Yeah.
So you might have seen recently, like, the science people doing low volume content and saying,
Yeah, a lot of them.
just one set of training session and you can get this much muscle
I've
growth.
seen a lot of that, actually. It's driving me crazy.
So there was a recent study by, oh goodness, let me see if I can find this one. Herman. It's out of Brad Schoenfeld's lab. It's because they saw 0.37 centimeters of muscle growth. That's more than most other studies. So in trained people, only doing 6 sets of quads, they saw more muscle growth than the majority of other studies.
Right.
Like, as a scientist, I'm like, it makes no sense. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
And as a scientist, when you see these studies portrayed to you on social media, 9 times out of 10, I look at them and I say, oh yeah, that paper, I don't know how they found that, but it doesn't make any sense to me. And it's not that the scientist did anything wrong. It's that a finding in isolation sometimes means nothing without replication.
A finding in isolation doesn't mean anything without replication. Replication is the foundation of all of this. Now, if you were tasked, let's say you were in a science class and as part of a lesson, you were supposed to get to the bottom of this, think of all of the things that could have gone on. You could go all the way from there being some technical malfunction. You're using sonograms, which are not super accurate by themselves, as he said himself. You're talking about, it could be user error. There could be something with an individual, some outlier. Maybe there was some feature of his physiology that threw off a reading, or maybe that person just grew like crazy for whatever reason for him. The point of all of this is to say that firm consensus, having hard conclusions, is difficult. It requires more work, time, energy, resources than the entire field of exercise science can offer directly. So hanging your hat on it is not intelligent. It's not scientific. It shows a willingness to be led by really good marketing. And if you ever have taken a college STEM class, it's probably not even that good a marketing.
I think they mostly intend good. I think social media is making young up-and-comers, maybe it's this weird temptation where, like, I almost think some young up-and-coming scientists are asking questions and running studies that they think will get clicks on social media. And then does that impact how you actually collect the data and your integrity as a scientist? I don't know.
I'm going to tell you why. It's been proven time and time again to work. If you're a young kid or whatever, an older person, whatever, and you want to become popular, the fastest way to do it is to say something nobody else is saying.
The bias problem bothers me the most because this is obvious in every field. You want to remove bias as much as possible. But when you have people chasing followings and selling merch, you're selling Team Full Range of Motion shirts. How unbiased are you as a science communicator or as somebody that's actively doing research? That's a recipe for as much bias as possible. And it's actually influencing which studies they're selecting to do in the first place. This field has turned into something that selects for bullshit, and it's shameful. I also want to cover Jeff Nippard, and I generally like Jeff Nippard, but I think even he is starting to see the corner he's placed himself in because he leaned so hard. And every single video is Science Explained, where he just goes out of his way to go down a bunch of research and then give normal-ass training recommendations. But it's led him down some weird places, and he's made some recommendations that have gotten him some criticism, and it's hard for him to defend when he's in front of guys that are literally the biggest and strongest human beings in the world.
What's your biggest gripe with, like, the science-based lifting community, would you say, if you have one?
All of it. All of it. It's this face right here. It's that. What if here's the twist. What if Jeff likes getting throat checked? What if that's like a secret little kink of his? He kind of has that face like he's stirring some shit in front of these 2 big men, and he has that like giddy smile on his face, like so tell me what you think. Tell me what you think of my filthy little evidence-based programs. Throat check me, daddy. I bet you won't.
So some of the people that are in the science-based world, it's like they have such a strong opinion that this is it.
Yeah.
And my theory is the only theory, and everybody thinks that they are like the beginning and the end of bodybuilding. And honestly, most of the time when I find it's a science-based guy, they don't have any credentials.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, I can sit back and say I have 400 pros. Yeah, this guy's telling me I'm doing it wrong.
Now that's huge right there. Credentials aren't just academic. If you had all the money on the line and you're working on a project with really high stakes, you're not going with the guy that just works in theory. You're going with the guy that has demonstrated over and over and over that I can make this turn into something in the real world. Anybody who's seeking that profession is not going to waste time with the research because it doesn't tell them anything. It doesn't give them any insight into how to manage individuals and how to problem solve, because none of it takes into account the true complexity of putting together a program tailored to the individual.
That those are valid, and honestly I share a lot of those same frustrations with the community, to be honest with you. Like overconfidence and overstating what the evidence says. Like there might be one study that found a small effect of this one thing, but like are you going to take that and run with it and then say these bodybuilders are doing it wrong because this one thing on like college-aged recreationally trained men? Like I don't know, you have to put it in context.
Uh-oh. Is Jeff getting blackpilled on the evidence? Now I don't want to come at this in bad faith, but all of his edited, scripted videos to this point have not echoed any of this. He might talk about hedging your bets, or he might talk about working the middle ground, but he's never talked about it on his own channel like this because he's being kind of condescending towards the evidence base. He's addressing a group of people who are his people. What responsibility does he have in making sure that they don't take it too far? What checks and balances does he have? And I would argue that he's probably putting himself more in the safe zone. Will I do it the right way? And I would say he absolutely doesn't. You can watch his videos and watch him take a bunch of studies and work through what seems to be the logical way of pulling something out of it, but it's not, because he's filling in the holes with his own experience, and he's taking his liberty saying this is valid because my experience says so, and this is probably invalid because my experience says so. And at the end of the day, that's not really scientific. You're just injecting your own bias and experience and kind of repackaging it as something that has the stamp of science on it. And the thought experiment I go to is you could take Jeff, you could take Israel, you could take anybody, and if they started at 19 with a regular ass bodybuilding crew filled with meatheads, and they went through the exact same journey doing those methods, and they took it seriously, they would probably look the same. In Israel's case, he would 100% look better.
Like, I love the science. My audience is also not, your level, quite frankly. I'm sure there's some in my audience, but like most of my audience is natural, younger, more on the beginner side. And so like, that's a lot, in a lot of cases, that's what the studies are on. But like, there are no studies on Larry Wheels until we do the calf study.
That is, I think that's a cop-out. I remember somebody giving Jamie Kennedy shit because he made the Mask sequel, Son of the Mask, and it was terrible, and everybody hated it, and they gave him shit. He's like, well, I'm making it for kids. Like, you're judging it like, you're an adult. Like, it was the biggest cop-out that something doesn't have to be quality or whatever because it's for this other, it's kind of a Mott and Bailey. The Mott and Bailey is you present something that's very hard to defend as an argument. When people push back, you go back, well, I'm just saying X, Y, or Z. All of the science gets pushed. All of the research papers and their endless interpretations get pushed as something that is going to give you faith that you are doing the best thing you can do because it's science. And they always have the term optimal, the smartest, the best. This is the best way to do it. They're not saying, well, you're new, so most things are going to work, which is absolutely true, by the way. He's saying we're studying the people that grow the absolute most from training and seeing the differences. And you can even make the argument that it's the least meaningful there.
Right?
There's something that's like on there, you see now guys like training back, and it's like really isolated. Like, Charles Glass was common for kind of doing this stuff. Yeah. Like, I feel like there was a lot of engineers that went into perfecting, like making a shoulder press, do shoulders, but then everybody's like nowadays is like trying to lay upside down and do shoulder press.
No, trust me. But that's what annoys me, because like that's not science based. Like everybody calls it science based, but like it's kind of gimmicky to me. It's a gimmick, really. Like,
it's all gimmick, and the thing is, for me, it's about bodybuilding is just monotonous.
Yeah,
it's day in and day out.
I agree.
It's the same routine. It's the same stuff. It's just.
So I think this shows something really important, because he's like, well, it's gimmicky to me. He's going off of vibes. It seems gimmicky. If you set the precedent that you need to have this really thorough understanding of biomechanics to find the most optimal way to grow a muscle, you need to know where the muscle is the most length and disadvantage, and then you need to load it at that position, and you got to pay attention to the strength curve, and the movement has to be conducive to X, Y, or Z. That is how you logically get the types of things that he's done in his video, where he's inventing new exercises, or he's trying to lie on the floor to get some strain in some particular part, to work so hard to do anything that is not just a standard proven exercise. And this guy hit it on the head. It's monotonous. There's a mistaken belief that many people get that they're going to either strategize or technique their way into the next level. Dan Green wrote West of West Side, talking about the lessons he learned, and he pushed back against West Side a little bit. But one of the things he said was, when it came to like getting my bench up, I knew I wasn't going to technique my way to a 600 bench. I had to do other things. I knew I wasn't going to technique my way to a big squat. I had to grow my quads. I had to physically get bigger legs. And that's what he did, and that's what made him great. Similarly, in bodybuilding, there's this idea you're going to find the magic exercise. Like, if you find the good exercise, Now do you grow more, but then you just keep growing all the way up to the Olympia stage? Of course, that's not how it works. You might find something that offers a unique stimulus now, but you're still up against diminished returns, which come for everybody. And that's why Homeboy here is saying it's monotonous, because it's always high effort. It's always grinding. You're always up against your limit, and you're always up against the resistance of your body to change. It's not like high-minded 4D thinking trying to get out of a hypercube. It's literally just, I have these tools, and there's a fixed amount of work I have to do and a fixed amount of progression, and I have these few strategies. Now go to work. That's literally what it is.
With the intensity, for years and years and years.
I don't know. I'm not trying to sound like a hypocrite. Like, sometimes I do exercises that people would consider weird, and I think it's fine to throw those in. But like, the fundamentals are, like we've been talking about, like intensity, using decent technique, progressive overload, consistency, training really hard, finding exercises that work for you, using a good range of motion. Like, they're fundamental stuff. Like, it's fundamental stuff, right?
Yeah, it's like if people tell me to go try it, it's hard. And I said, well, so is doing a Rubik's Cube and standing on one leg.
Yeah.
It's challenging, but it's not going to make me grow.
That's true.
Okay, so Jeff's right here, but he does sound hypocritical, because this is the important thing that people need to hear. Joel Seedman makes the exact same fucking argument when people are going down all of his nonsense exercises. Go to any thread, you'll see people ripping into him. And even when he was interviewed by either Tellender or Israel, he's like, 90% of what I do are the basics. He doesn't show a single video of the basics, because that's not what gets clicks. Now, Jeff isn't as egregious as Seedman. I'm just trying to talk about, what he presents to his audience versus anything else. I'm sure his audience walks away with good generalized training knowledge. The point is, he's capitalizing off of these unique gimmicky things, because that's what attracts people. The fundamentals is not what attracts people. So it must be, Jeff, that those little things that you're now calling fine to throw in should offer some edge, should do something extra. But in the face of these guys, he's having a really hard time supporting the idea that they do anything extra, because it's all the things. And that's why, and people will give Jeff credit, he trains hard, he trains like a beast. I would like to ask him, hey, if you did this entire B tier list of exercises for all of your body parts, but your progressive overload and your effort and consistency was on point, do you think you'd be smaller than you are now? I would really like to hear him comment on that.
I did a video talking about like my own frustrations with the science-based community, and it was a lot of the same stuff. Because what happens is these things, these weird things, get super high engagement on social media because it's like weird, it grabs your attention. But like, let's be real, bro. Like, there's no science on it. Like, you're just using that word. You know what I mean? It's actually true. Like, I read a lot of the science, and like most of it is on pretty basic exercises. And like, we're testing range of motion, we're testing proximity to failure, we're testing volume, we're testing like broad stuff like machines versus free weights. It's not like this lat pull down versus this lat pull down. Like, that's largely just like personal inference or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like, really, like the bicep does this, right? So
Yeah.
whether I'm doing like this,
Yeah.
like this. I mean, you could do 5 different variations and be in the gym for an hour.
Yeah.
Or I can just lift some heavy weight.
I kind of agree. I mean, I think you can bias the stretch aspect with like different positionings and these kind of things, but like when it comes to like 95% of the gains, it's going to come from doing this under high levels of tension.
Here's the thing, guys. The research as it stands now gives very, very little information. Most of it is incomplete, probably wrong or misleading, and we won't know until it's replicated thoroughly enough, which it's not going to be anytime soon. The things that it can't account for are the things we know that are important. As Jess says, the basics, its effort, its progressive overload, the things that everybody has been doing for a long time, but people, it's the narcissism of small differences. Everybody is left with the same basic template to work with. People will niche down and start to count pixels on the canvas as if these little, this progressive overload or that, as if it conclusively makes a difference, which you have no reason to believe. Like I said, I think Jeff's a smart guy. I don't think he's being like lying or being disingenuous here. I just don't think he's connected the dots for how having that be his brand for so long has taught people to look at training a certain way that is not just detrimental to training, but is patently ascientific. I know a lot of you guys think this is like drama baiting, but this is actually real important substantive stuff. And that's why I make content about it periodically, but I'm off to go make 3 whiteboard videos about programming. So hopefully you'll forgive me for making this one right now. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Till next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.